These nuisance calls, okay, so due to the friendly nature of our concerned residents regarding their neighbors, will these calls meaning convictions or they'll be meaning calls? That's the question I have. So in other words, a resident calls and says, this guy next door and an odor comes over the fence and whatever it is. Does that count as a demerit against the person as far as the nuisance is concerned? Or the person has an RV parked in his driveway for more than 3 days. Does that count as a nuisance call or does that count as where are we at? Is it a conviction or is it just the call? And who's going to prove whether or not the call was actually made or not? The guy was guilty?
Well, the decision about guilt is a decision for the judge of the municipal court.
Okay, so in other words, after 3 convictions from the municipal judge, then we move forward with the punishment or whatever it is?
No, sir. The way this is drafted, if I read it correctly, is that our code enforcement officer, upon the occurrence of the requisite number of events, may declare the property to be a nuisance-generating property based on the definition of that term on page 2 of this ordinance. At that point, notice is given to the property owner, and the property owner has an opportunity to appeal the decision of the code enforcement officer in municipal court.
On each one?
On whether or not the code enforcement officer's decision to declare the property a nuisance-generating property was a correct determination.
Okay.
That goes before the municipal judge.
Okay, but it's not just if someone calls up and complains about somebody and no citation is issued or there's no appearance in front of...
The code compliance officer has the same authority, I believe, by ordinance to issue a citation. That citation be processed through the municipal court system.
Okay.
And so, the purpose of the ordinance is designed to deter violation by means of the potential penalty for violation. That penalty is within the sound discretion of our municipal judge.
Thank you, Mark, because we got some pretty tough customers out there.
But I have a question, but this doesn't prevent the police from issuing citations. That would be included, correct?
I think the police can always issue a citation when they find a violation of state or city law.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good. I'm good. I'm good.
Call for the vote?
We had a call for the vote, but we had some citizens. I'm sorry, Leslie. I'd normally be real mean, but I'm not going to be real mean. Let's see, this is item what?
Item 4.
Guess what? Nobody signed up for item 4.
Got one guy who wants to talk.
Oh, Mr. Castaneda, I'm sorry, sir. There wasn't a 4 on this thing, but I understand you came up. Thank you very much. Come on up.
J.D. Castrajana, 128 South Winston.
I'm going to put 4 on here
Put a
just to
4
keep it legal.
J.D., raise the...
Raise it. It's raised.
Thank you, sir.
I enjoy the fact that you all seem to be working together. Now, for the city attorney, y'all have used the word nuisance, and I'm assuming some of you have read what the reports were with regards to what happened at 134 South Winston. And I can only tell you about 12 times that the police were called. So I don't know if this falls into the category of being just a nuisance. To me, that location is a business. It's an event center. Now, how can I possibly say it's an event center? Well, only I can tell you what I witnessed and what took place with the police department. And that's what annoys me. It could be anything from a party of about 30 rappers. Just envision it in your mind, the singing and the dancing, along with the urinating out in the yard, along with coming out on my property and urinating. It can be that, and we can go a little further. I'm supposed not to say this, but there was another party on a Monday evening, approximately, probably about 25, and it's an estimate of transvestites, on a Monday evening, and no one spent the night, and the police were called 3 times. Pretty cut and dry right there. I can get into the details, which are something else. There's not enough time for that. I can tell you about the lady who rented the house for a 17-year-old because they're going back to high school, going to be a senior, and comes to me if I could keep an eye on them. She didn't want her house destroyed. Again, it's an event center. It's a business. Then I can tell you the witnessing of 4 bongs where they're in the back and they're smoking the marijuana and so forth. That's all right. I can tell the police, but absolutely nothing is done. Nobody checks it out. It's an event center. Police are called twice on that particular one. Then, the frat party. And what bothers me is it's advertised. It's on Facebook. What a great place it is for a frat party. That had no women but about 40 guys. I can't begin to tell you what that involved around. Then there was the time about the girl who put the bunny ears on. Why do I see this? Because my house sits up, direct view down to the lower one, fence or no fence. She lost the dice game. I don't want to go into what happened in the swimming pool. Then, is there more?
She lost her what?
She lost a dice game. They were playing dice. They were drinking.
Oh.
There's all
Oh,
these
okay.
gals. She lost. She has to take it all off.
just
Put the
wanna make
bunny
sure I
ears
heard.
on. Head into the pool. Okay, so I'm watching all of that. Saturday night, we're going to have 100 people who are coming there for a wedding. I don't know if it's going to be there or whatever the case might be. It's an event center. Over here, we're using the language of it's a nuisance. This is really a nuisance. It's a business. It's a business, I don't care what. Nothing happens on Tuesday. Nothing happens on Wednesday. Nothing happens on Thursday. It repeats and repeats and repeats itself. Every weekend, it's quite obvious. Why am I involved? Because of the design of the 3 stately residences there, which it's my property. My property. They have to come up my driveway. They don't understand it. It's not their property. Oh, I haven't even told you about the parking. Evidently, the Castle Hills Baptist Church is fine because when the police show up, because there's an issue, there'll be 10, 15, not just me calling, but 10 or 15 vehicles that are in the driveway blocking us from coming and going. What the police do to settle it, to resolve the issue at the moment, go park at the church. And then that part's over with, depending. Numerous times there's 2 calls, 3 calls, et cetera, et cetera. I want you to think about my property value, how it's gone up. You meditate on that one for a minute. Let's see, what else? I liked what he said a minute ago. My job, fire, is to inspect every business. This is not somebody who's passing through town and they want to rent the place, because nobody stays for a week, and they want to rent it, come with their kids, and maybe we want to go see the Alamo. It's an event center. It's not 1, it's not 2, it's not 3, it's not 4, it's not 5. It goes on. It just goes on and goes on. But we're calling it a nuisance. I want you to think about that one for just a minute. I think that's a little light for what it is. Now, is there anything else that I've got here? I've already told you about all of that. The parking is a major issue. It's an event center. There is really no place to go park 15, 20, 30 cars, and it's a common occurrence. And I'd like to tell you that I'd be up here and it's a nuisance and it happened twice. No, it hadn't happened twice. It's an ongoing thing. I love the ad because they charge the people, a 10% occupancy tax. I didn't know y'all were taxing them, but y'all were making money. That's the way it's advertised. It's right there in black and white. All you have to do is go to the website. And it goes on and goes on. So if we're going to treat this as a nuisance, now, I'm sure there's a million Airbnbs that are fine. I'm sure there's no problems. It's a European thing, and the concept is great. But this is the United States, and this is Texas, and we're in Castle Hills. There is no on-site manager, owner, whatever the case might be. I understand it. It's a business, and that's the way you're supposed to run it. And, you know, the home is a man's castle. I get the picture. It's his castle. He's there for earnings, and whatever he can, you know, draw out of it. This particular situation, you know, the potential buyer, owner, whatever he may be, lives in Austin, Texas. Now, before I came to y'all, I went to him. He said, why don't you look at this as a baby shower when you see all these cars? You know, listen, you got the time? I've got the info right here. A baby shower. What else was there? That I'm misreading this because here, what did he say? It's on here. Politicians, actors, actresses, please don't disturb them. And this is all that I've seen. Problem is, I think I started off wrong, but maybe I did it right. You call the police. Problem is, they won't even come up my driveway. They need to come in and view what I see and listen to whatever it is that's one time they were going to come to blows with guns. That prompted another phone call. But I guess, and I don't even know that would get resolved if they were there looking at it. Because they go to the front door, they don't shut it down, but they calm it down is what they do. Once in a while, you know, they'll take it all inside. Oh, what's the worst part? The worst part is this particular residence, which is on the website, shows the entire back of the house with a swimming pool. There are no drapes, nothing. So whatever goes on there, inside or outside, you're watching it, you're viewing it. It's a full show. So I guess from my perspective, I just wonder if I were here telling y'all, I'm going to open up JD's whatever, and I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm going to advertise, but it's all on the QT. You rent it, you got it for a day or two or a night or whatever the case. Many a time, the people don't stay. They really don't spend the night there. They're gone like at, let's say 4 o'clock in the morning. Several of them are just gone. I mean, the place is vacated. They had their good time. I happened to witness where some girls, as we're waiting for them to move their cars, took the drugs because the police had just turned around to leave, and when they noticed the police were there, how they threw them underneath the car. And it was later on, because I couldn't find them anymore, but they had thrown them underneath there. This is an ongoing thing. It happens right here in our backyard, and it's absolutely in my backyard. I'm not criticizing Airbnb because I'm sure there's some good ones. I'm sure that thing works somewhere. It's like when the gentleman from Airbnb came to me, explained to me, how would you like to have a trip to Florida? They've got others over there, so you can see how it really works, and I would change my mind. I don't know if it was a potential bribe or what it was. This is what happens on Winston Lane in Castle Hills, Texas. You've got the police report somewhere. It's pretty thick, that's what it is. Nothing has ever come out of this other than they acknowledge that there's an issue, that there's a problem, and they calm it down or they take it inside. Now, maybe winter's coming and maybe it'll slow down a little bit. I don't know. But this is not going to go away. So the word nuisance is what disturbs me. It's a business. It's an ongoing business that is not regulated, whether it's wait till somebody drowns in the pool because they're drunk or marijuana, whatever the case might be. Maybe there's a fire. Is there fire extinguishers in this place? Who knows what else, in terms of rules and regulations. They don't have to adhere to any guidelines that any business person up here on Blanco Road, Military Drive, that they're subject to. They have to adhere to nothing. It's a business.
Thank you, Mr. Castaneda. I appreciate that. We didn't set a minute limit. Normally we're at 3, but thank you for your explanation on this, and I do appreciate it.
Mr. Mayor.
Bernard? Bernard, could we hold it down to 5 minutes? Thank you.
No problem. Bernard Yettermeyer, 115 East Castle Lane. I just have, does this nuisance also apply to businesses and churches, schools?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
It might help for the citizens to know what's included in F under section 26-151, what we're talking about are included as nuisances. Would that
Bernard, do you want to yield for a second or go
Yeah,
ahead?
no, so that's, I was just wondering.
Would you
if-
sit on the front row, because we're going to have you right up after that. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you.
Well, under F, it says, this is under how you determine if it's a nuisance generating violation. Number F, the last one, is the catch-all, which I think is where it will help these situations. It's any action constituting trespassing, drinking of alcohol by minors, disturbance of the peace, illegal drug activity, harassment of passersby, gambling, prostitution, sale of stolen goods, public urination, theft, assaults, batteries, acts of vandalism, excessive littering, loitering, graffiti, illegal parking, noise generation which interferes with a residential property owner's use and enjoyment of his or her property, curfew violations, lewd conduct, criminal mischief, obstruction of traffic, illegal parking in front of a residential property, lighting violations which interfere with a residential property owner's use and enjoyment of his or her property, noxious odors emanating from the property which interfere with a residential property owner's use and enjoyment of his or her property, and any other nuisance declared by operation of law. That's the catch-all in this definition, and that's after talking about violations of the Alcohol and Beverage Code, Civil Practices and Remedies Code, which has common nuisances under state law, anything in the Texas Health and Safety Code that's a public health nuisance, and any action declared by nuisance by a section of the City of Castle Hills Code of Ordinances. So it's a catch-all after a whole bunch of other statutes.
I just want to add one thing, Mark, and because of Ms. McLinnes reading parking, illegal parking in front of residential property, I think we would like to include illegal parking on someone else's residential property, because that's what's occurring here. It's not just in front. They're
Well-
parking on Mr. Castrojana's property itself.
Well, parking on Mr. Castaneda's property without his permission is either trespass or illegal parking,
Okay.
both of which are covered in the first 4 lines of
So
subsection
as
F.
long as it's covered, thank you.
Yeah, and to answer the citizen's question, although some of these violations have to interfere with a residential property's use, these offenses, such as trespassing or underage drinking by minors, those would apply whether it's on a residential property, a business property, basically any property in the city limits.
Thank you, Mr. Yedemeyer.
Is that,
Bernard's back.
Well, I was just thinking that, I think it's a good idea, but then all the schools and churches are going to get in trouble every school day, every Sunday, most of them here in town. So that's with the parking alone. And then the impeding traffic, I think, was one of them. So, I mean, I think it's good, but I think it might cause more.
Well, the schools have places to park, or they arrange for it. The churches already know they're not allowed to do that. That's already regulated, just in
I
case
know,
you
but they
didn't-
do it. That's what I'm saying. Like, if we as a city, I think we let them do it.
I've got a quick question regarding that, and just out of curiosity. Wayside Chapel,
Sorry? Yeah,
South Garden View Lane, to point out what Mr.
Right.
Udemeyer was talking
it's
about.
regulated.
Yeah, it's regulated, but they're still parking on the street.
Well, then we should do something about it. We're supposed to.
We have signs up not to park on one side of the
Right.
street. We covered that at a time. I'm just asking.
Yeah.
So is it against the law to park in front of somebody's house, Mr. Schnall?
Only if it's illegal for some other reason.
So I can park in front of
You
Ms.
can-
Winger's house?
You can park in front of my house, Mayor.
Can I park an RV in front of it?
It's a public street unless, this is a nuisance. Of course you can, anybody can park on the
I was
street.
just curious. I wasn't trying to be
Yeah.
mean. Okay,
Then you
all
can.
right, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was just curious. I don't know. Yes?
Mr. Snoll, is the intent of this ordinance under Section A, in order to ensure abatement of the nuisance, the city shall require the owner of the property and anyone with control or custody over the property to register with the city on a form designated by the city any activities which are to occur on the property. That's virtually impossible.
This is only applicable to a property that has been determined by the code enforcement officer to meet the definition of a nuisance-generating property, and if the property owner objected to the determination, the property owner has been given an opportunity to appeal that decision to our municipal court. Once that happens, either the person is cited and the declaration is made by the code enforcement officer, it is not appealed, or it's appealed and the municipal court judge in his judgment determines that the designation is appropriate. At that point, this is part of the deterrent effort, okay? This is part of what is designed to try and get people to not allow their properties to be declared nuisance-generating properties. Is it the best solution? I don't know, but it's a solution we don't have now, and it comes to the council for consideration to help alleviate circumstances which the council has been made aware of, and which is designed to provide incentives in the form of this registration requirement, in the form of the bond requirement, in the form of potential fines by the municipal court, to get people to bring their properties in compliance. Absentee owners who repeatedly rent their property to irresponsible tenants the city needs to find a way to protect residents. That's what this is designed to do.
Do other cities have this? Do other small cities around the area have this?
I am not aware. I haven't read the ordinances in cities I don't represent. The cities I do represent have nuisance ordinances. They're not quite as extensive as this, but the other cities I represent do not have problems like Mr. Castaneda just described. So it really does depend city to city. Another city which I did represent did have a problem with short-term rentals and addressed it through amendments to the zoning ordinance about 10 years ago. I no longer represent that city, but when we did that, that seemed to alleviate a problem because shortly after that was done, the owner of the property that had generated the complaints leading to the enactment of that ordinance sold the property, and it returned to its normal status as a true single-family residence.
Okay.
One more thing.
Yes, sir.
For your information, because I can't address the citizen directly, I believe there is under consideration an ordinance which will address short-term rentals in Castle Hills. And I think the staff is working on it as well as the city attorney. I thought you might like to know that. for the
Yeah, I would
benefit
like
of
to know,
Mr.
Skip.
Lee.
Thank you.
I'm sorry?
Because I understand the ordinance as it stands now is the only person who can live on a property is either a resident or someone who actually works for you.
It's not quite that way, Mayor, but this is really, I appreciate Mr. McCormick's comment. I think that's informational.
Good.
But this is not on the agenda, so it should not be discussed in further detail.
Thank you.
I think I've heard a call for
Letting
the
me know.
question.
Okay.
Call for the vote.
Thank you, Leslie. Okay, we've gone through discussion, and Mr. Castaneda has spoken. I don't see anybody else on the agenda unless I've overlooked them. Thank you. So we're going to call for the vote. I even forgot where, here we go. All in favor? All opposed? Good. All right, it's unanimous. Thank you very much. Council, I'd like to move, if you don't mind.
May we have a short recess, Mayor? 5 minutes, please.
5 minutes, okay, 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Thank you. Man, I already called the deal, but I would like to move item number 6 up and then continue with item 5 after that. Isn't that the truth? Okay, everyone, if it's possible to move back to your seats, please, I sure would appreciate it. There you go, one. Thank you, Minnie. Okay, it is now 10:03, and we're returning back to session. And I asked council if they wouldn't mind if we move item 6 up, and Mr. Stahl would like your comments on this, please.
Mayor, the concerns on item 6, and item 6, so that everyone knows, is discussion and possible action on ordinance number 2018-10-09-D, which would amend the first 2 sentences of Chapter 2, Section 4, City Secretary of the Code of Ordinance, where it says that the city secretary, the revision would be that the city secretary should be appointed and terminated as appropriate by the city manager with the advice and consent of the city council, with the city manager being responsible for supervising the city secretary. The concern that we have about that is twofold. One is that this provision would be in conflict with another section of Chapter 2 of the City Code of Ordinances, and the other concern relates to the potential for exposure to members of the governing body who act in regard to the appointment and termination of a city employee.
Can I speak on that?
Sure.
Okay. Mark, you are probably aware, since you've been around for a long time, that up until 2014, and this is something that's done by many cities, the city secretary was actually hired and fired by the council in the same way that the city manager is. It was changed, and, I regret doing that, but it was changed because there was a problem with one person. So this isn't going back to where we were, it's simply an adjustment. It's not, in other words, there was nothing wrong with what we were doing before, so are you suggesting that we should simply go back to the original position because there was no conflict?
I'm not taking a position on what the council should do. I'm expressing a concern from a legal standpoint that if you adopt Ordinance 2018-10-09D, you have enacted an ordinance which is in conflict with another section of your code.
And is that the section relating to the city secretary?
It's a section related to the powers that the city council, by enacting the ordinance, granted to the city manager.
Right, and I'm not interested in affecting that, obviously, but we had that ordinance. We had that ordinance at the same time that the council, for many, many years, up until 2014, actually hired and fired the city secretary. It did not interfere with anything. So that's what I don't understand.
I'm not debating that issue. I'm responding to the mayor's question, which was, is there a legal concern about this ordinance? And as I said, the legal concern about this ordinance is that adopting this ordinance would have the city council and the city of Castle Hills having 2 provisions in ordinances which are opposite, which are in conflict with each other. And there's also a concern about the potential exposure of the governing body if it gets involved in the kind of personnel decision of appointing and termination. And I'm not going to speak further on that second subject unless it's in an executive session.
Thank you.
Okay, does this have anything to do with us being a court of record now too, Mark? We weren't a court of record in 2014.
This section is not about being a court of record. Item 9 would be relevant to discuss that only under item 9.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I object to consideration of the question based on the fact that this statute creates, or this ordinance would create an internal conflict in our code of ordinances.
Taken?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand you, Ms. McGlynn.
I am objecting to consideration of this question based on the fact that our attorney has advised us that it will create an internal conflict between our ordinances. where in one section, we are giving council the authority over the city secretary, and in another section, we have delegated that authority to our city manager. So we are violating our own form of government that we have adopted and the powers that we have delegated to the city manager.
Call for the vote on the question.
Okay?
Uh,
We call for the vote on the question to table this item,
No, her motion against the consideration. I call for a vote on
Okay,
it. So we
okay.
need to vote on it.
We'll call for the vote of the consideration of the question.
Mayor, is there a second?
Yes? Oh, is there a second?
I'll second that.
So we have a motion and we have a second for calling for the consideration. All in favor
Wait a
of moving?
minute, wait a minute. If we're voting for the consideration, for her motion, that means if we vote yes, we table this motion, and if we vote no, we hear this motion. Is that right?
That's what I understand.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understood it correctly.
Okay?
Okay.
So all in favor of Amy's tabling? All opposed?
I'm abstaining, I don't know where we are. I have not a clue where we are.
2-2, the mayor will break the tie and vote to.
No. There's no tie if somebody abstains. We already found that out at a.
Mark,
I think there is a tie if someone abstains. It's a 2-2 vote at this point.
We were told otherwise by your partner at a prior meeting that if somebody abstained, that was still a vote and there was no tie. That's what we were told. I'm just bringing it up.
Mark, what's your opinion on this, please?
I think that if it's a 2-2 vote, it's a 2-2 vote, and the mayor can break the tie. And if it turns out I'm incorrect, this matter can come back before the council at the November meeting, but I just don't think that the abstention counts as a no vote.
Mayor votes in favor of the call for the question.
Mayor, I'd like to have
Yes.
reconsideration of the vote.
Okay?
I have a question to ask.
How can he
Mr.
reconsider if he abstained?
Point of order.
Yes.
Point of order, he didn't vote for it, and so it's my understanding under Robert's rules that you can't ask for reconsideration of something you didn't vote for.
I'll make the motion
Yes.
for reconsideration.
Yeah, the motion.
She didn't vote for it
The
either.
motion for reconsideration needs to be made by someone who voted in favor of the motion to begin with.
And that was just Mrs. Scott and I.
Thank you. Moving on to the next item, which is 7. Which is 5, discussion and possible action upon ordinance number 2018-1009C, amending the schedule of fees for the live trap rentals and, what is that? Oh, parades. Live trap rentals and parades? Oh, that's a combination. As contained in the ordinance number 2018-4030B, and repealing all ordinances or parts of the ordinance inconsistent or in conflict herein. Ms. Winger?
Yes. When I was going through the fees that had been imposed, I discovered that we are now charging by the day to rent a trap. And that was never the case before the fees were changed, and I don't think that it's an appropriate thing to do. I think that, having had a discussion with Mr. Rapley about this, we now have some spray-free skunk traps that I asked for, and they apparently cost $75. Our prior traps are older traps and don't have the same value. So what I had asked for was to have a deposit of $50 to $75, and I think somewhere around here, Mr. Rapley gave me a change. Didn't you, Mr. Rapley? I don't know what I did with it, because there's so many papers here. But you gave me a change to what I had before. Oh, wait, maybe this is it. Okay. So now it has a live trap fee requiring a security deposit of $75 for skunk traps and $50 for other traps. But it says, with such security deposit to be fully refunded to recipient if trap is returned in good condition within 7 days or less. If a trap is not returned in good condition within 7 days, then $5 per day shall be charged beginning on the 8th day, and any refund of the deposit shall be reduced by $5 each day after 7 days if the trap is not returned in good condition. The part I object to that's still in here is if a security deposit is reduced to 0 before the trap is returned, then a charge of $5 a day shall be charged to the renter until the trap is returned in good condition. It is not necessary to do that, because what we are doing with the deposit is basically paying to replace another trap. So we don't have to keep adding money on. And I bring this up because we had a situation some months back where there was an issue with somebody who happens to be a wounded warrior who lives here, and evidently there was some confusion because he had wanted the trap picked up. It wasn't picked up, and he was given a very high bill. Way beyond, this was a regular trap, an old trap that we had. We should not be putting onerous fees on a residence. This is a service the city provides. The regular traps should have a $50 deposit. The skunk traps, I felt, should be valued at what they cost us because they're new traps, and they should not, in other words, if somebody doesn't return it, or they lose it or they damage it, we have to replace it. So we can do that. But we should not continue to charge beyond the point where we've recovered the deposit. So I wanted to change the wording to reflect that and say exactly what I just read, that it should, the deposit will be used to replace said trap.
Thank you,
Not go
Leslie.
beyond that.
Thank you, Leslie. Let's get a motion and a second on this.
And then there's another part to it that I just happened to notice. It wasn't anything that I, had any axe to grind on, but I noticed that we had a parade fee. I don't know how many parades we have here. In terms of Fiesta, I imagine that from time to time or every year, the city can choose to waive that fee if the city council wants to do that, correct?
I really am confused about who actually owns that CHCO. I don't even know if it's a franchise now. I understand that we have been designated as an official Fiesta thing, but I'll
Okay,
go
well,
along with that if Mark does.
whatever we want to do with it, the point is that I don't know what other parades we have, but I know from past experience in other cities that you can have other parades. Somebody can come in and demand a parade permit, and basically you have to grant it to them. $100 does not cover the cost of a parade, because we have to put police officers out there, we have to put blockades out there, we don't know how long it's going to take. So I feel that we should have a minimal fee of $10 to get the permit, and then add on to that whatever the police department, because it's basically police and fire, their work, what they feel it's going to cost, whether they're talking about overtime or whatever, and then whoever's going to do the parade has to determine if it's worth it to them. But we shouldn't be, providing free service, because a lot of times you may be dealing with people who don't even live here. And I don't know that it's ever happened, but as I say, if the only parade we're having is Fiesta, well, the city's figured out how to deal with that. But what if somebody else comes in?
Okay, can I have a motion and then a second on the table, please, so we can get
So
into
moved
discussion?
for this.
Thank you, Ms.
Yeah.
Winger. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Mr. McCormick. Okay, I guess we ought to take these one at a,
So as amended, I should say that I'm moving it with the amendment that I put in.
okay.
And for clarification, Ms. Wenger, is your amendment simply to delete the sentence that begins, to delete the last sentence in section 1? So
That's
the-
right.
Okay, so
Yes.
the amendment,
correct.
the motion now is to adopt ordinance 2018-10-09C without the current last sentence
Correct,
in section 1.
correct, thank you.
Okay, and Mr. McCormick, that's acceptable to you as the second? Thank you.
Okay. Let's start with discussion, and Douglas, you wanna start?
I think it's a good ordinance, we ought to pass it.
Okay. Ms. Winger, did you want to add to your discussion on the item, please? Thank you. Ms. McLean?
I do have one question, and it goes to kind of the rationale and what we're getting at with the $10 fee plus additional fees for the parade fee. Are we going to be requiring that the organization that wants to have the parade use our police department and public works for the placement and removal of barricades, or is that something that they can avoid by hiring their own off-duty sheriffs or whatever they decide to do? I want to be clear about whether that's a mandatory that they use our PD and public works or whether they have options.
I think it should be mandatory that they use ours, because having lived in cities where there are frequently very disruptive parades, if they simply bring in their own people, you can't be sure that we're going to be protected.
Okay. Does that need to be amended, Mark, to state that particular thing that Ms. Winger said, or do we need to just move forward with it as it is?
It probably would be good if we would change the quoted part of Section 2 so that it reads a $10 permit fee plus the additional fees as estimated by the city manager or designee for city, police, environment, and city public safety infrastructure, i.e. placement and removal of barricades and street closures, close quote. I know Mr. Harada wants to speak on this item.
Well, there's one, excuse me, I'm sorry. There's
ahead,
one
mister.
that is just bringing into concern about those barricades. So, for the last, 4 to 5 years that we've known this parade's gone through, they've used flasher to go ahead and take care of all the traffic control and all that, because there's safety ordinances of what the motorists need to note of clarification and notice up ahead in the way the parade is going. So I'm going to tell you that we've never maintained that for the barricades. That's always going to be the police department that's always gotten flasher to come out and take care of that. And then to come back on the clarification of animal control on these traps. Pardon? I understand, but that flasher is the one who's certified to make sure the traffic control is taken care of. That's why the PD has always gotten, and this is already taken care of, to my knowledge, is taken care of by the Fiesta who pays for flasher to have those put out. But PD puts that and coordinates all that. Just FYI on that. But coming back to clarification on the animal control traps. You're right, Ms. Winger. Those traps were very old. 1993, when I first started, a lot of those traps were very old. So as of December 16th that I bought 4 new traps. The incident that happened, I won't mention the address, but I will note that those 4 traps that I bought, because we're minimized on what we purchased, so I made sure that those old traps were taken out and the new trap was used. So there wasn't nothing that we were giving the resident a bad trap, and it wasn't noting that they didn't know of it, because they knew of the $5 charge that was passed in June that you allowed to go through, that Mrs. File asked you to, because of the fact that we needed to make sure, because it was going to be $15 Mrs. File wanted, but she said, well, you know what, we want to make sure we stay on top of trapping because of rabies, so we want to make sure we pick up skunks or raccoons, so we came at a $5 charge. So we made these residents aware that they're signing and circling that it will be a $5 charge. And to clarify that there never was, since 2003 when I became supervisor, before that, there was always a $1 charge per day and a $55 deposit check that was given back to the resident, and then they only pay for the $1 a day. But then we changed that but you said that it was we were never charged.
Rick,
Yes.
I just got a question. Is the receipt when the guy takes the trap, when a guy comes up and he takes the trap, okay, is it say on the receipt that there's a...
Most definitely, sir. It says all that on the transaction paper, and then as permits take care of it, that they'll bring that up and it'll show that the $55 deposit check is returned, and then we put the check number back on there. We've never really received cash.
How much was the bill for the gentleman?
Mayor, it's in the,
Wow.
Mayor, it's in the rental agreement.
Yes, sir.
You don't want to have a rental agreement?
Of $5.
So you don't want it a money-making operation? Yeah.
That's just a deposit, miss. It's a $5 a day charge. But then recall that this will take services of the Public Works to go and pick up the cage, set the trap, and pick up and take the animal. So that's even more that the Public Works needs to get compensated for.
We don't have to charge for every single thing we do because we constantly brag about the fact that we have these.
What, hey, Rick,
But then this would hold up other
You can-
services that are needed to get revenue of some sort. Yes, sir.
Well, that's the thing, then we're just socking it to the residents all the time to make money, when we really just need to replace
Yes,
the
sir.
traps.
Rick, I got a question, and you
Yes,
could
sir.
use, I refuse to answer on the grounds that it might incriminate me. What do you do with those animals when you catch them? Do you take them downtown? Do you throw them in the ditch? Do you take them out to Eisenhower Park? Do you
No, sir.
call
And
me up and we cut it up and eat it? What?
depending on the side of the area, the area that the city was picked up, then we'll take the wildlife to that area.
Oh,
We'll take
okay.
it to, so we're picking it up on the south side, we'll take it to Aggie Park. We pick it up on the north side, we'll take it out to the south side. But it just depends on that area. If we pick up a wildlife that needs to go ahead and go to wildlife rescue, then we'll take there, because it's injured or it just needs to go
So it
ahead and
does,
get-
the point I'm getting at, it does take time. And God bless you for not moving it from one area to another where it might get,
No,
you
I had
know,
a
might
resident-
get disoriented.
Yes, but I had one resident who actually said that he kept on seeing the same possum, that he decided to spray his feet, make sure we weren't letting it go in back of his house. Yeah.
Thank you, Rick. Thank
Okay.
you. Mr. McCormick, did you have any,
Mayor, I think the reason why it's $1 versus $5, there's still some operational costs for the service.
Well-
And so, well, I understand that, but again, there's some portion to recoup from operational cost for the service.
so what Miss Winger's suggestion is in her thing there is to, you know, we don't want to make it a money-making idea, and if council goes along with that, so be it. You know, is there a fee that should be put on there? I don't know. That's up to y'all.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question.
Sure.
I wasn't under the impression that Public Works delivered and picked up the traps. I was under the impression that we as citizens actually had to go to Public Works, and then you all do come and pick. I mean, if you had an animal, I could see you picking it up, but if I don't get an animal and I want to bring the trap back, do you come and pick it up?
On that form that you all, or the resident signs, that is city property. The resident has no right to touch, nobody has the right to touch that trap. So we pick it up, but more for the safety. We don't want nobody getting bit. If it's a skunk or a raccoon, that's possible rabies, okay? We do sometimes catch baby fox inside as well. They also carry rabies.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hirado.
Mr. Mayor, I move the motion.
Thank you. All right, we have a,
Oh, question.
okay, go ahead, but make it quick, okay?
Okay, well, the wording just isn't very clear. It says, if a trap is not returned in good condition within 7 days, then $5 per day shall be charged beginning on the 8th day, and any refund of the deposit shall be reduced by $5 for each day after 7 days if the trap is not returned in good condition. So that's only if the trap is not returned in good condition that you get a $5 a day charge? Or is it just if you keep the trap longer than 7 days, you start accruing a $5 charge? Well, okay, my concern is, Well, I understand that's what you're trying to do, but that's not what this says. It says if the trap is not returned in good condition within 7 days, then it starts charging $5 a day. Well, if it's not returned in good condition, I imagine you lose your deposit if the trap is returned in not good condition, not a $5 a day charge plus your deposit if it's not returned in good condition. You just lose your deposit if it's not returned in good
I
condition.
think that's what it says. And the reason I
and-
think that is because you charge $5 a day for every day past 7 days that you keep the trap. When you run out of money, you don't have to bring the trap back anymore.
Well, there's an extra in good condition. I think that's what Mrs. Scott is pointing out, that now if you delete the last sentence, the very last 3 words is, your deposit is only reduced by $5 a day after 7 days if you don't return the trap in good condition. And I think it's the in good condition there which qualifies to where you could possibly never pay a daily fee, even after 7 days, if you beat it up, or, I mean, I think those are the words that were kind of extra.
Okay,
Mayor, I'll
well, then
call
the
for
not
a
returned
vote.
in good condition needs to be deleted.
The vote. All right, we had a motion on the table and a second, Ms. Winger and Mr. McCormick, on item number 5. We've went into discussion. There's a call for the vote. All in favor?
In favor as amended.
As amended. All opposed? 3-2. Thank you, council. All right. The next item is item number 7, which is discussion and possible action on directing the city manager to issue an RFQ for the municipal court prosecutor. Mr. McCormick or Ms. Winger?
I'll defer to Ms. Winger.
Okay. Ms. Winger?
Well, we don't have any agreement with the, prosecutor, and so this seemed as good a time as any to issue an RFQ and see who else was out there.
Okay.
We-
Do I hear a motion to move that forward? Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick. Discussion? Anybody have anything to say about that? Douglas, Ms. Winger, McLean?
My only comment is that there's not even a comm sheet. There's no, I mean, I see it's just for an RFQ, but there's no backup for why now.
Well, we have a description already in the files about what the municipal court prosecutor does, so that's obviously a basis on which you issue the RFQ.
Okay. Ms. McLean, did you have, Ms. Scott, did you have any comments, please?
I mean, I'm not exactly sure why we're doing this. If he's doing a good job and there's no problem with him, then if it ain't broke, don't fix it, so.
Okay. Mr. McCormick, did you have any questions? Okay, with that said, let's go ahead and bring this to a vote. And all in favor of item number 7 as read? 3, all opposed? 2, passes 3-2. Thank you. Let's move on to item number 8, discussion and possible action directing the city manager to extend the hiring freeze on full-time, part-time, contract hires, and position changes in all city departments until January the 15th, 2019, unless sooner resolved by council. Mr. McCormick, Ms. Winger?
Did you want to? Because this was originally your item.
The same argument we made for the original freeze, I think, still applies. I think it provides some stability in the workforce until we get to a place where we have a better grip on things.
Okay,
Discussion.
yes?
Does this preclude?
Do we have a
any-
motion in a second?
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
We have a motion in a second, right?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Okay, let's have a motion on this.
Did you make a motion?
Miss Minnie, do we have a motion and a second on this? You didn't? All right, let's have a motion on it, please, on item number 8. Excuse me, item number 8. May I have a motion, please?
Okay, I'll move to approve it.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Mr. McCormick, Ms. Winger, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Does this preclude any department head coming before the council at any time in case they have an emergency vacancy that they need to fill at that time? Does this preclude that?
No,
No.
that's why it says, less sooner resolved by council.
Thank you.
Ms. Winger, did you have anything to say other than that while we're moving forward? Ms. McGlynn, did you have anything to add to the situation?
Yes, I do. I have a huge problem with this. It potentially jeopardizes the public health and safety, especially going into the holiday season. We have a surplus budget for next year. We have no reason to believe that there should be a hiring freeze. Mr. Rapley has not suggested such, and by doing this, I feel like we are taking some of the authority away from Mr. Rapley. We have chosen to have a city manager form of government, and if a hiring freeze were necessary, that would be something for him to bring to our attention, and we don't have anything in front of us, and I don't really understand what provides stability until we get a handle on this. A handle on what? Being on council long enough to understand how the city runs, or getting a handle on the fact we have a surplus budget?
We don't.
I really, well, not if you take into account the roads and streets that we need to fix. Certainly, we don't have a surplus budget. But to take care of our operating expenses, we have a nice little nest egg to go towards whatever we decide needs to be done for our improvement. So I'm really confused why we are trying to do this. In my mind, it potentially jeopardizes the public health and safety of our residents.
Ms. Scott?
Doesn't.
Yeah, I've never heard of hiring freezes unless you're in a deficit,
have
dire
one now.
straits, or contemplating bankruptcy, because there's no need to freeze a full-time, part-time contract hire or position that's been funded by our either current budget or the budget that we passed. In all city departments, if you're having to bring it before council, it can be weeks before they can bring it before council, whereas if you have someone that quits and you need to replace them ASAP, whether that be the police department, the fire department, sanitation, public works department, it extends the amount of time that position remains open, and everyone else is having to work harder to make it filled. I really do think this is something that if we were in a position to need a hiring freeze, our city manager would bring it to us and let us know that we need to freeze hiring because money's tight. But looking at the budget that I looked at, and now I think we're close to $500,000 surplus on that budget, there is just no need for a hiring freeze at this time, particularly since I understand we just lost someone in Public Works that quit. So currently, Mr. Harada couldn't even start hiring until October 15th under the previous hiring freeze that was passed by council. Now this would keep him from potentially hiring someone until the 15th of January unless he brings it before council before then, which would be the soonest would be November. So that would leave him without someone from now until the council decided to approve it or not approve it in November. This is ridiculous. This is a city manager's job to do this, not city council's job.
Actually, council's job is to control the budget. That's our job.
Mr. McCormick, thank you, Ms. Did Mr. McCormick, did you have any thoughts on this, or you want to?
The original hiring freeze was all city departments except fire and police. And so I would move to amend this to include all city departments except fire and police and one position in public works.
But if you do that, then there's no limit to what can happen. And the fact of the matter is that whenever the police and fire, do something like this, they have to train somebody. They have to bring somebody in. So it's not something that they do overnight. Of course, as Chief Dover pointed out, If you need somebody temporarily because you have an emergency situation, that's something the city manager can approve. So there's no problem with somebody coming back to council and saying, we suddenly find that we have these vacancies and we need to, have you lifted in this condition, and then we do. And that was your language.
Mayor, can I speak to the operational level, specifically, again, in Public Works? I met with Mr. Harada today, and he needs to fill this vacancy. He had an employee leave at the end of September for sanitation and streets. For instance, this week, Mr. Harada had one employee out on medical leave and another one on vacation. Rick was out today driving the trucks to ensure we maintain the 2-week collections, 2 frequencies per week. He has 2 drivers, 2 collectors in order to maintain this twice-a-week collection, in which the residents obviously have been accustomed to this service level. If you can't fill this position, this might impact sanitation being behind and continually trying to catch up during the week. This will also impact streets, areas that he has the same gentleman working on different shifts in different areas, potholes, crack sealing, replacement street signs, mowing, right-of-way cleanup, drainage just around the city. Again, I can ask Mr. Harada to elaborate to this, but this position needs to be filled in order to continue to maintain this twice-a-week collections and sanitation.
Okay. Amy, Douglas, you're next.
So what perplexes me is that there is no backup again for this item on the agenda. There is 0 in here. And Ms. Winger is saying that, no, it doesn't apply to anybody that we might hire part-time, but specifically it says a hiring freeze on full-time, part-time contract hires and position changes in all city departments until January 15th in 2019. This provides no flexibility for our city manager to manage the city. It provides no flexibility for our department heads, for Chief Dover, for Chief Siemens, for Mr. Harada, to manage their departments and provide the city services that our citizens expect. This is an absolutely ridiculous overstepping of our bounds as a council.
Douglas?
This is the problem when you've been up here long enough. Mrs. McGlynn and Mrs. Scott, we've had hiring freezes before. 2009 and 2010, we had hiring freezes. That's because of the Great Recession, and we had no idea where the budget might be. So we've had it before. It's nothing new. It's not overstepping anything. It's the responsibility of the council to bring forth this when they deem it necessary. Second, to Mrs. McGlynn's comment, it is clear by the authors of this motion, the intent is as significant as the law itself. Both people who have brought this have said, the intent is, if an emergency comes up, a department head can call for a special city council meeting. You can do that in 4 or 5 days. Or 3 hours, as we did with the Wedgwood. Immediately bring forth the petition by whomever comes forth, give an economic rationale that why you have to do it, and it can be done. You don't have to wait till next month. You can do it in, as I've been told now, 3 hours. So this is not something that is going to put anybody at risk or at danger. I don't see it, doesn't make sense, but there is a history of this city where we have had this before.
In a recession? Are we in a recession now?
We also had it, in case I expected that question to come up, we also had it in the early part of the turn of the century, the 21st century. When I first got here, when we didn't know exactly where things stood, and we were trying to sift it all out. It's nothing new, it's nothing sinister, it's nothing usurpation of power. It's a duty of a council trying to do the right thing for the taxpayers of the city. But if an emergency comes up, as Mr. Harada, I've been informed, has, he can easily come forth and say, I want an emergency meeting, we've got to hire this guy. No problem.
I see it as purposely tying the city manager's hands to be unable to manage the city and hire as he needs and sees fit.
Mr. Schnall, I'd like your opinion on this. Does this override the city managers in our form of government in order to, in your opinion, tie his hands as far as council taking over all of hiring? Or as written?
The provisions of Section 2-137 of the Code of Ordinance describing the powers and duties of the city manager includes appoint or remove all subordinate employees. That is part of what the council, the city ordinances say for the city manager. I think the council has the authority to enact a hiring freeze if there is a reason satisfactory to a majority of the council to do so. Having an emergency meeting on less than 72 hours' notice, there is a very high bar to pass. And I'm not convinced that I could comfortably tell you that the police department having one fewer officer constitutes an emergency or urgent public necessity such that immediate action is required because of an imminent threat to public health or safety. I just don't know that we can get there. So I don't think you can do this on 3 hours' notice. I think you can do this on 72 hours' notice if you need to. And the question really comes down to, you've hired a city manager, so if the city manager comes to you and says, this is appropriate, then it makes sense to be done. If not, the city council has the authority to do it.
And of course, I would agree with you, Mark, in that, one police officer short is not an emergency and something that we can resolve in 72 hours. I totally agree. I was talking about, something more serious that could be an emergency if you suddenly had a whole bunch of people come down with the plague or something like that. Then you'd have an emergency. So we don't do things just for an emergency reason. When we had the fire at the Wedgwood, we had a reason to have an emergency meeting. So we know we can do it. But you don't call anything an emergency. And when the police department needs more people, they, have to go out and look for them, and they have to train them because our guys are very well trained, and they certainly have 72 hours to let us decide that.
Okay. I think I've already been explained to. The question I have is, why would council want to do this? In order not to overspend. And what do we have a city manager for? Oh, he does. No, we keep avoiding the fact that
He
it's not
doesn't
form of
control the
government.
budget. That's our job.
Okay, well. Okay, we have a motion and we have a second on the table. We've talked about this. Let me make sure that we do have someone signed up. We have, Ginger isn't here. I don't see anybody signed up for this item. Okay,
Call for the vote.
did you want to speak, JR? Go ahead.
Mayor, City Council, J.R. Trevino, 112 Hibiscus. It looks pretty obvious to me that these trio of council members are attempting to do their best to hamstring the city manager so that he can't perform to his fullest of his abilities the way that he should and the way that Mr. Chanel has pointed out that he should. So trying to go in there and cite a reason that doesn't exist to do a hiring freeze, I don't understand it. And I could support it if we were in a recession, if the city was in dire economic straits, but that's not the case. So I'm not seeing, nor have I been shown what y'all see as a reason to have a hiring freeze. I think that we have a city manager that has more experience running a city than probably anybody up there, and that we should let him do his job.
Thank you, Mr. Okay, we have a call for the vote, and let's go ahead and move forward with item number 7, which was as read. 8, you're absolutely right. All in favor? All opposed? 3-2. Surprise, surprise. Okay, let's move on to item number 9. We have a couple of people signed up for this one.
I understand why this is on here, because I had a call on Friday before the agenda was posted from Mr. Rapley and Mr. Fletcher, and I agreed to pull it, so I'd like to pull it.
Okay,
It shouldn't have been posted.
all right. We have the author of the,
Excuse me, Mayor, Mr. Fletcher confirmed by email, based on our conversation, that this item was modified to discussion and possible action. There was no mention of tabling this
Well,
item.
you were on the phone with him.
I was on the phone,
And
and
he- and
he
you both-
recorded it in an email that verified the way this is
Okay.
structured.
Well, all I know is that you called me and.
With Mr.
and I-
Fletcher.
And after he explained it,
Mm-hmm.
I said, go ahead and pull it if it doesn't tie in to the prior motion by Mr. McCormick.
Okay,
And-
well,
And
well-
since he had no objection, I told you to go ahead and pull it.
I think that was
So-
different from
So
Mr.
I can pull it now,
Sure.
right? I'm pulling
Absolutely.
it. I'm pulling it.
I'm just saying that was different from what Mr. Fletcher
Fine. Well,
interpreted to
Well,
an
we had a
email.
different
hang
understanding, but
on,
I'm
Ms.
pulling it.
Winger, what did she say?
What's that, Mayor?
What did Mr. Fletcher say?
Mr. Fletcher sent an email confirming that the modification would be discussion and possible action of this item.
Okay, all right, well, the author of the, Mr. McCormick, you're on it too?
Yes, I want to pull it.
Okay, good. Then the item number 9 is pulled. All right, we're going to go into the discussion part of this, which is item 10, discuss the previously prepared capital improvement plans, CIP to include streets, drainage, building improvements set an order of priority due to urgency and importance. Mr. McCormick and Ms. Winger?
Yes, Ms. McLennan's comment that this is not truly a CIP is correct from what I can tell. However, it includes a great deal of the information which would be in a CIP. And the point to looking at this is to point out that we don't really need to spend a couple $100,000 with an engineering firm doing a capital improvements plan when we've got most of the information right here in this document. I think that the information is available from past experience. We do have to, if we come up with a CIP plan, we are going to have to do a better job of the finances than would be contained in this document, because this document's 5 years old, and the finances are obviously going to be out of date. But most of the information here is what would be necessary for a CIP. What I don't want to see us do is go spend hundreds of thousands on a plan, on yet another plan that produces absolutely no work and no outcome. And then it will be useless in 3 years anyway. So that's my point of discussing this.
Okay. Since this is a discussion item, it doesn't appear to be any action to be able to be taken. Ms. Scott, did you have any things to add to this conversation?
The only thing I'd add is this is not a CIP, and a true CIP is a 4 to 10 year plan that's actually then implemented over 4 to 10 years to complete capital improvements for the city. So it's not something that suddenly is no longer any good. It's a plan, it's then put in place, it's completed in the time in which that it's scheduled to be completed in. These are this is an interesting look at the city as of 2013, I believe, it was 2014. But yes, this is not at all a capital improvement plan. That is something that needs to be put together by the city manager and the appropriately educated individuals that would provide a 4 to 10 year plan to actually solve the city's problems and to be implemented over those 4 to 10 years, give or take, which is typical for an actual CIP.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Ms. McLennan, did you have any comments on the item on the table, please?
I agree with Mrs. Scott that what we have in front of us is a very interesting look at the city. And I read through the first 2 pages are a street and drainage master suggestion list. And since being elected last year, I think that I've tried to do a lot of these. I've even included, Mrs. Scott and I both attended a small cities problem-solving clinic, which is one of the things listed on here. And so the suggestion list is great, but this is not a CIP. This is not the type of information that is going to help our city apply for grants. This is not the type of information that's going to help our city pass a bond. This is not the type of information or plan that is going to support any major type of action by council if we decided to get a loan to to support some of our capital improvement projects for streets and drainage. This is not the kind of thing that Bear County or another agency is going to look at and accept as a proper plan and give us money, help us, contribute to a cause. It's simply insufficient for that. It's great information. I enjoyed reading through it, but this is not a CIP. Perhaps it will help Mr. Rapley in engaging with an engineer to help us have a plan, but this falls very far short of anything that's going to help us get down the road.
Thank you, Ms. McGlynn. Ms. Winger, did you have any questions or comments?
Yes. The fact is that this is exactly the plan that was put together after the last bond failed under the direction of Mayor Smiley. And quite a few very intelligent people worked on it. What people here, and I hear this all the time, are sick and tired of, is that all we do is spend the money that they would like to see fix the streets on studies. The CIP, as far as everybody here cares about, is streets and drainage, and that is what this addresses. It's true, it doesn't address fixing City Hall. Nobody cares about that. So, this is all we need to have. As far as Bear County is concerned, it makes no difference what we put together. We put a fantastic drainage plan together that cost us a whole bunch of money, and it didn't make a damn bit of difference because they're not going to give us any money because they're spending all their money on San Pedro Creek. So for us to continue to spend our money that we could be spending to fix streets and drainage in the hopes that someday, things may change at Bear County is just a pipe dream.
Thank you, Ms. Winger. Mr. Gregory, do you have any comments on this item on the table, please?
Seems like the only thing the city has done for a long period of time is item number 38. Do nothing. I have no comment. I think this is, I have no comment.
Thank you very much. Mr. McCormick, did you have anything to say?
No, let's move on to the next item, unless somebody else has some comments.
Okay. Thank you for bringing forward what you did.
Sure.
Okay.
There's no action, Mayor, so.
We're done. It's not an action item, so let's move on to number 11. Discuss the report on use of the Texas Park and Wildlife grants prepared by Councilman McGlynn.
I have a couple of questions since I authored this thing.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, Mr. This is a discussion item.
Yeah. Ms. McGlynn, as I understand, I read someplace else here lately that you didn't ever do a report, right?
No, a report was never done. It was never replaced on the agenda, and frankly, what I learned in going through this process is that without a master plan, without a strategic plan, without a CIP, we are not going to be able to get any sort of grant until council has a future vision for the city, has plans in place, have money and have financing lined up. You have to have concrete plans, you have to have concrete ideas, you have to be on the same page, and you have to have a council that quits undoing things before we are ever going to have a chance. And so this has just died on the vine for a while. I haven't given up the hope of finding some grants for the city, but the way we are going now with the decisions that are being made, based on the grant writing class that Mrs. Scott and I have attended, and we're going to another grant writing class that is free, that's at the DPS, that is actually how to get on the computer and apply for these grants. I don't think we will make it past the first criteria where you have to put in what your strategic plans are, what your goals are, what your project is. You actually have to have projects in motion and planned to be able to get these things. And so it has gone on the back burner, and I will be happy to bring it back out because I would love nothing more than our city to be able to benefit from some of these things. Hollywood Park was able to obtain a grant of $500,000 towards their redo of their community center and their pool. Mr. Rapley has advised me, I didn't realize that the Walker Ranch Park on West Avenue was actually a Parks and Wildlife grant that the city of San Antonio was able to get. And he's also advised me he had something to do with, when he was in Del Rio, they got a couple of these grants. But we are not in a position, we do not have the background information to be able to provide to the state to be able to even begin to apply for these things.
And so there was never a plan done either with regard to Texas Parks and Wildlife grants? No?
No, because we as a city
Okay.
don't know where we're headed.
Okay, My information must have been incorrect, and I apologize. Let's press on. Motion to adjourn.
Typically, for the Texas Park and Wildlife Grant, there's
I
a
think there's a
project.
motion to adjourn that's been made. There's no discussion after that until the motion's been voted on.
Second.
Mark?
To adjourn is a privileged motion, but there's an agenda item that has not been mentioned, that's on the agenda, announcements by mayor and council members. So Mr. McCormick has made his motion. It's a privileged motion. It does need to be acted on. It can't be amended, and there's no discussion.
Okay. I guess we're adjourned.
Guess we got to vote on it first.
Oh, all in favor? All in favor? All opposed? All abstain? You're opposed, you're opposed? 3-2. Okay, we're adjourned.
Right.